Hey Northlands, my name is Jordan Van Zale, and I'm so excited to share a testimony with you about finding real community in a, dare I say, unprecedented time. Are you tired of that word yet? But really, so listen, in 2020, right, in March, when everything we felt this deep loss, right? We felt the loss of community, we felt loss of our small groups, of church life. And then when we did see each other, it was different. We couldn't hug. We had to wear masks, right? You get it. We're not going to harp on that because we're still in it. This is what's so beautiful about this testimony because it's still in the making. But I remember feeling so isolated and alone and using that language a lot. I remember talking with my husband, Ross, and just being like, we're just so isolated. We're so alone, isolated, alone. And would you believe it? We became isolated and alone. And, it's crazy really what the words you speak, like you're either sowing faith or you're sowing doubt. And so I remember the Holy Spirit just woke me up one night and was like, you need to reframe this immediately because you are only going to get what you expect. And what are you expecting? And I remember, honestly, I was like, honestly, God, I don't think I'm expecting anything. And he was like, oh, ding, 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 that's your problem. So I started expecting God to show up in Zoom calls. I started expecting God to show up when we were hanging outside in 30-degree weather just to be able to see our friends face to face. I started expecting God to move on phone calls or even through text messages. I actually started expecting God to be faithful to what he said, because the reality is God's nature didn't change. God's desire for us to live in community, not just with each other, but actually with him, that remains unchanged. My unity with Jesus remains unchanged. So my unity with everyone else also remains unchanged. So how do I outwork that? Because the path I was going down was being a recluse and being like, well, it's not the same, therefore it's not good. You know what I mean? So my husband and I, Ross, we started showing up on Zoom calls. We started being vulnerable, more vulnerable actually than before. Really sharing our struggles with our friends and being much better listeners. Have you noticed, guys, on Zoom calls, you actually can't interrupt as much as you do in person? Like you have to actually be a better listener. So this year I grew into a better listener just by being on Zoom calls. And we grew in our friendships with our friends more this year than we ever have before. And I haven't hugged my friends in almost a full year, and so it would have been so easy to write it off as not worth it because it doesn't look like it had before. But God was so faithful. God blessed every conversation. He showed up in every meeting we were in. And as a friend group, we walked through real life this year. We walked through grief and a cancer diagnosis and heartbreak and loss together. Hard stuff that we've never walked through before as a group. And we walked through it together with God. And yeah, this was the best year. It was literally, I wrote down in my, Pastor Greg always tells us to keep track of our testimonies. I literally wrote that down of 2020 was the most beautiful year of friendship, despite everyone telling me it was going to be a lonely year and an isolating year. So my encouragement for you this morning is to say yes to community. Even if you can't be there in person, that's okay. Say yes to the Zoom calls and commit, show up, be vulnerable, be a good listener, because God's desire for us to be in community is unchanged. It doesn't matter what it looks like. He is faithful to show up and to, really bless our time together. So go join a group and let's grow together in community.